Let's go ahead and get started. Everybody, welcome to another week of Available Work. And speaking of another week of Available Work, we have our very own Tommy Simmons, pretty well known in the employer law and workforce development areas. So with us always, hi Bonnie, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, just mentioning Tommy here. I know many people that have Tommy on speed dial.
Yeah.
For all those big employment law questions, and he always picks up. So
Yeah,
it's a great resource.
We go around meeting with employers and doing our conferences, and people just say, we know Tommy, and he's done a lot for us. So, but we appreciate it, Tommy. We're very excited to have you on again. Another episode where we kind of focus on educating employers, educating the workforce, and this is pretty much a kind of big deal because you technically coined the title to the podcast. I think we want to give you credit where credit's due, Tommy. Say hi to the folks. Also, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you've been doing here at TWC.
Well, thanks, Commissioner. I started with the agency back in 1984, the Texas Employment Commission, which 11 years later became the Texas Workforce Commission. And you're actually the 9th employer commissioner I've worked for at the agency. And all these years, I've just enjoyed talking with employers and helping them out and speaking at conferences and, writing publications for the agency on employment law. And the whole idea is to help employers understand what they can and can't and should not do with their employees.
That's awesome. And again, I've always kind of said it. This is one of the best resources that we can provide you to employers. And this is also pretty timely. I think we were talking about we're technically live on Spotify right now. We've got one out there, and I think we're gonna throw all these episodes out here in the next couple of weeks when we kind of announce our presence. But again, very timely. This is there's some news late today that kind of broke over the last couple of days that we'll be wanting to be talking about. We're getting a lot of calls about it. It really involves the Department of Labor overtime rule that was struck down by East Texas Court here pretty recently, and we'll get into that. We have some questions, and again, very fortunate to help employers understand the nuances and the details, what they should be thinking about in the next coming months. So, Tommy, let's go ahead and get into the topic there. Like I said, the Department of Labor, their overtime rule was struck down. Can you give us a pretty broad understanding of what's going on with that?
Yes, sir. That was one of the big questions that we've been getting from employers for the past several months, in fact. Ever since the Department of Labor announced it back in April of 2024, the first phase of the increase for the minimum salary for salaried exempt employees went into effect on July the 1st, raising the minimum salary from $684 per week to $844 per week, and then it was slated to go up to $1,128 per week, effective January 1st, 2025, and then starting July 1st, 2025, it was slated to begin a series of 3-year increases every 3 years. It would go up automatically based on current wage data from national wage data sources. And that rule, which had already gone into effect on July 1st, 2024 for phase 1 to $844 per week, that rule on Friday, November 15th, 2024 was declared invalid, completely invalidated by the Federal District Court in East Texas. Mm-hmm. And the Federal District Court said that basically the U.S. Department of Labor, in promulgating that rule, had overstepped its boundaries, had exceeded its authority under the Fair Labor Standards Act, that they had effectively, in placing so much emphasis on a large increase in salary, weekly salary requirements, they had effectively replaced the duties test for the exemption with the salary test, and that there was no indication that Congress had any intention of letting the Department of Labor do that. Mm-hmm. Plus, they also pointed out that there is nothing in the Fair Labor Standards Act that authorizes automatic extensions, automatic increases every 3 years based on current wage data. So for those reasons, the rule was declared invalid and unenforceable. And what that means is that the minimum salary for a salaried exempt employee has gone all the way back to $684 per week. And what that means in practical terms, because employers, of course, still have to worry about recruiting and keeping qualified employees for their positions, they're going to be basing things like that, salary choices on supply and demand and the free labor market and what it takes to attract and keep a qualified workforce rather than try to follow what the Department of Labor was saying should be a minimum salary. So it's going to be based on supply and demand, and employers will be free to have more flexibility in setting weekly salary amounts.
So we're talking annually. Let me try to follow this. We moved from about 35,500 to 43, higher about 44,000 a year. So people that were earning that in that at that salary rate that was basically the threshold. Anybody that was it within that threshold was qualifying. And also, we probably want to talk about the duty threshold of duties for those employers. And so that was moved up in July. And so that's what we're currently working on right now. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's kind of the status quo for today, basically, until January.
That's right, Commissioner. The salaried exempt employee regulations have different tests for the salaried exempt status. Number one, in the statute, is a requirement that the employees who are exempt from overtime pay have exempt level duties, executive, administrative, or professional. So the duties test is in the statute. In the regulations were two factors in a salary test. First, salary basis. An employee who is exempt from overtime pay as an executive, administrative, or professional employee has to be paid on a salary basis, and that means they're paid a predetermined amount, at least $684 per week, that is not subject to reduction on the basis of either quality or quantity of work performed. And the salary level part of the test has to do with the amount of the salary. Before July 1st, it was $684 per week. Effective July 1st, it went up to $844 per week. January 1st, 2025, it would have gone up to $1128 per week. But because the court threw out the rule entirely, that means that not even the $844 per week is a requirement.
Okay, and that would have basically added millions of employees to basically opened them up to receiving overtime benefits on that scale of things.
That's right, Commissioner. Below the minimum salary threshold for an exempt salaried employee, there is a presumption that they are not exempt from overtime pay, and they would have had to be paid overtime if they worked more than 40 hours in a 7-day work week.
Okay.
And so that has been, that rule has basically been declared invalid by the court, and the status quo now is a new one. It's going to go back to $684 per week. That's the minimum salary for a salaried exempt employee.
So functionally, HR departments all over the state, or speaking nationally, I guess, were reclassifying their employees and having to kind of rework their salary schedules. Did they move it? Did they have to move them back? And would they be? Let's look to the future. Is there any reason that they should hold off on making that change again? Is this in concrete now? Is there an appeal coming? What's next for HR departments, basically?
Fantastic question. HR departments should definitely pay attention to the websites of the U.S. Department of Labor, that's dol.gov, and also the Texas Workforce Commission, twc.texas.gov. And they should also consult their private sector employment law attorneys to the extent that they have one. They're always welcome to call Commissioner Esparza's office at the toll-free number of 800-832-9394, option 4, or email us at employerinfo@twc.texas.gov, and we'll be glad to talk with any employer about the current status of the salary requirements. But the long and the short of it is that the rule has been invalidated, meaning that employers have more flexibility based on supply and demand and what they think it takes to attract and keep a qualified workforce to set the compensation level of their salaried exempt employees. And by the way, the same thing goes for their non-exempt employees. Employers, of course, have to take a number of factors into account when determining what the wage level of any employee should be. What does it take to attract and keep the best workers? And you have to give them an economic incentive to want to stay with the company. That's just employee retention, and that's definitely a best practice of HR.
Yeah, and so employers, I think looking at the differences in the regulations between exempt and what we have is exempt in, as far as like the salary thresholds. But Tommy, we were talking about this earlier today about the specific duties, and you mentioned executive administration, and one other I can remember.
Professional.
So professional, like attorneys.
That's correct. The professional exemption is for people who have arrived at their positions by virtue of a prolonged and specialized period of academic study, usually resulting in a 4-year college degree or a master's degree or a professional degree such as Doctor of Medicine or Doctor of Jurisprudence, and they usually have a state license or certificate in order to do their jobs. And so those people can be exempt professional employees. And then administrative employees, those are the top level back office staff, support staff of a company, people operating at the chief financial officer level or the VP level, general manager, department manager level, where supervision or management of a major aspect of the business operations is their primary duty. If that's what their primary duty is, they can be administrative exempt as long as they're paid, a minimum salary of at least $684 per week. For executive exempt employees, they have true executive authority, the authority to hire and fire. They supervise 2 or more full-time employees while doing such duties, and they are in charge of the executive decisions for an entire enterprise. Usually that's the president or CEO of a company, but in some companies, the general manager may have hiring and firing authority, in which case they might actually be executive exempt as well.
Yeah, and so, I mean, employers are not limited to being able to provide extra incentives over that. If there is somebody who's actually exempt as a maybe like a management type, that they can just out of the goodness of their heart apply those overtime benefits to that person if they work over those hours. Correct?
That's perfect. Yeah. That's exactly what the Department of Labor regulation says. One of their regulations, 541.604A, says that an exempt salaried employee may be paid extra compensation on any basis, and that would be half time, straight time, time and a half, double time, or even compensatory time. So that's something that an employer can do as a reward for exempt salaried employees who go the extra mile and deserve some extra compensation. That's left to the flexibility of an employer.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, I knew that section number. I just didn't want to show off. Tommy, you're wonderful. You absolutely have an encyclopedic mind about the labor code and all the sections thereof, and we're definitely blessed to have you. Stepping down a little bit from the Department of Labor discussion, we want to kind of get to know Tommy a little bit more. We encourage you to call employers as far as helping with guidance from all of our attorneys. We see Jacoom Mario are inside the studio today too, so they'll be able to help out. But we're not a call-in show right now anyway. Not that we have any idea that how to work that into it. It would be fun, but definitely encourage you to call in and get to our attorneys to help you understand these regulations, especially the overtime exemption, and whether or not you are offering your those benefits to the right people in your company. We encourage you to do that. Bonnie, I think we probably have a little bit more time to get to know Tommy.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a couple questions for you, Tommy. So imagine you're a company starting here in Texas. What's the one wage or hour law you want to make sure this employer knew?
Well, Bonnie, that's a really great question, and I would say that you have to take into account the fact that both Texas and federal law apply for wage payment laws. And so on a national level, the most important law would be the Fair Labor Standards Act, which covers minimum wage, overtime, child labor protections, and also equal pay. On a state level, the Texas Payday law is the premier wage payment law that Texas employers have to know about. And basically, the focus there is on enforcement of the wage agreement and also on timely payment of wages due, and also on the legality of deductions from pay. All of those are extremely important, and an employer that has a good basic grasp of those laws is going to be spared a lot of headaches along the way.
Tommy, another question. With the holidays coming up in Texas, can they get paid extra for working on the holidays? What advice would you give to employers on that?
There's no law that requires extra pay for working on holidays, but most companies do as an incentive to get employees to be willing to work and to fully staff, holiday shifts. They will offer extra pay as an incentive, like holiday pay or extra pay for working on a holiday. All of those are up to the employer. That becomes part of the wage agreement if that's agreed to. And if it's part of the wage agreement, then it's enforceable under the Texas Payday law. So an employer should carefully plan out what kind of holiday pay protocols it's going to follow, and then try as best it can to let employees know what they can expect, and anything that is in the agreement is enforceable. So an employer should not promise anything more than they're willing and able to deliver.
Okay, here's a true or false. In Texas, employees must get paid extra for working on holidays.
That is incorrect. The law does not require extra pay for working on a holiday, but time worked on a holiday counts toward potential overtime. So if it puts somebody into overtime, then they have to be paid at time and a half based on the regular rate of pay for any hours worked in excess of 40 in a 7-day work week. So be very careful to record all days and hours worked on each day of the week by any employee. And if it happens to include a holiday, well, then great. Now, what a lot of employers do, so as, again, to give employees an incentive to want to work available shifts on holidays, if an employee is willing to work on a holiday, the employee will get the pay for the holiday pay for that day, plus they'll get pay for the hours they work on that day. That's not required, but some employers offer that as an incentive, and the ones that do offer that usually find out it works pretty well in terms of employee satisfaction, and the word gets around, and so pretty soon people are eager to be asked to work on a holiday, and that's good for everybody concerned.
Yeah, regardless if they're not getting extra pay or any more benefits, it's always just general rule of thumb. It's just you probably should be a lot nicer to people if they're working on holidays when it comes down to it. That's good rule of thumb for anybody out there.
I got one last question for me. I'm curious about this one. What's the strangest wage and hour law you've heard from any other state, and how does Texas compare?
Well, probably the strangest wage and hour law I've heard from any other state is, California and New York and some other states on the seaboards of the country,
Of course, California.
have probably the most comprehensive and detailed requirements, wage and hour for employers of all the states in the nation. But they have break requirements, and if employees are not given breaks, then that's a violation of the wage and hour law right there. So you have to give certain breaks during the day. In Texas, that's left up to employers to determine. Breaks are a matter of policy in Texas, but in many other states, they are actually required. So that's why it's common for Texas employers, after people, let's say, move from another state and they move to Texas because they want to move to Texas for some reason, and they get a job here, they'll go to their boss and say, hey, you're required to give me a 15-minute break in the morning and a 15-minute break in the afternoon. But the boss has usually never heard of that if they've just been in Texas, and that's for good reason. It's not a requirement under Texas or federal law. It's really a matter of policy. Now, it is a good idea to have breaks. Of course, there's a good reason why most companies have breaks, industrial realities and so on, but they are not required. Now, a very important thing to remember about breaks, and this is because of the Fair Labor Standards Act, if an employer allows breaks, coffee or rest breaks, or smoking breaks, or waste your time on Facebook breaks, then those are counted as work time. But if it's a true meal break, usually defined as 30 minutes or more, and it's where an employee is fully relieved of duty and they're able to eat a meal in peace without being disturbed by calls to action, those do not have to be paid. And in fact, most companies require employees to clock out for their lunch break and clock back in after they're through with their lunch break. So meal breaks don't have to be paid if they're true meal breaks. But it's important to be aware of the requirements for those regulations, and they're all covered in our book, the Texas Guidebook for Employers, and that is on our website at efte.twc.texas, all spelled out, .gov. That gets you to the table of contents. The book has a detailed index, and you can find all kinds of information on wage and hour laws and holiday pay and all these timely topics just by looking through the index and clicking around. It's like any website. You click on a topic and you go right to the topic. So, and any question that an employer has after looking at the book, they're welcome to call our office and follow up on it.
Yeah. So y'all, again, Tommy wrote that book. They put my name on it, but I don't claim it. It's not. I had nothing to do with the authoring or the editing or anything. But so we always like to say Tommy wrote the book. It's download the PDF, get quick access to it. So Tommy, speaking of California and New York and all the folks that are joining us here in Texas that are new to Texas, especially your businesses and your headquarters. I think Bonnie brought some quick facts.
Yes, I too have hot off the presses news here. Just in Texas grows jobs at a faster annual rate than the U.S. And I think that's a huge a huge win for us. And we've also reached a new high with the largest labor force ever in the state's history at almost 15.5 million. Which, again, that's a huge tout, a huge win for Texas.
That's awesome.
I mean, Texas continues to grow about 1,300 people a day, and there's reasons for that. So, we just keep wanting touting how great Texas is for business. And if you're ever looking to move your business to Texas, we are wide open for business.
Yeah, folks, employers that are coming around, if you're looking for your workforce, working through your local workforce development boards, call us. And Tommy Simmons, thank you so much. Eagle Scout and fellow West Texan, so that tells you everything you need to know about Tommy. Call him and let us help you with your business questions. Hey, Tommy, thank you again for being on here. Before you go, another week of available work. We love hearing it during our morning staff meetings that we kind of give around. It kind of, I always think it kind of rings a nice little tone. Can you explain a little bit more? Where'd that come from? How long you been saying it?
I've been saying that for years, and it just comes from my own personal, experience and philosophy toward work. I feel like, I've got just an incredibly great job working with employers, but it keeps me very, very busy. And working on cases, talking with employers, doing conferences, writing publications, there's not enough hours in the day to get all of it done to my satisfaction. And so I always appreciate weeks where I don't have to do a lot of traveling. I can have weeks where I've got 5 days of available work in the office, and I get 5 days of work done easily instead of having to spend time on the road or doing whatever. So for me, 5 days of available work means I've got 5 days to get the work done in the office, and I'll feel more satisfied because I feel like, wow, I actually got it done.
That's awesome. Tommy, thank you again for joining us, and I think we're going to wrap it up on the high note there. Thanks, everybody.